Guys. Today we are going to talk about how to write a process essay. You are going to probably run into this more often than you think. So a process essay can be really helpful in a lot of different facets of your life and in future careers. So in a process essay, the overall goal of what you want to do is to actually explain to somebody else how to do something. So how to is a really common phrase to put with a process essay. The idea is that if you explain these steps clearly enough, with enough detail, as if someone has never done this before, then by the end of the essay, they can replicate or reproduce or create whatever you're asking them to do or whatever you want them to do. So, for example, if a little kid is wants to learn how to tie their shoes for the first time, even though they might not be able to read at the level that you can write at, you should be able to describe to them the materials that they're going to need, specifically what kind of shoes, because they can't tie shoes that are Velcro. You have to be able to explain so they can visualize how to loop the laces so they end up with a tied shoe. Making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. These types of essays are really helpful in the workforce. They're really helpful for my control freaks out there when you want something done and you want it done your way. So people who are in business, who may be going into something managerial, this type of essay can be really helpful for you. So the idea is that by following your written instructions, then the person can successfully complete whatever you're asking them to do. So I had a student once who wanted me to do some kind of weird hairstyle. It honestly looked like two knobs on my head. But the steps were so unclear that partway through I got lost, and honestly, as a reader, I just wanted to quit because I couldn't make my hair do whatever she wanted it to do. So one of the difficulties with this essay, or with any essay as a writer, is that you do not want your reader to give up or quit. So one thing that's really good to do is to explain why that step has to be done and how it relates to the next thing that's coming up. So, for instance, think of a little kid again. If you told them to take something hot out of the oven, you have to tell them to use oven mitts, and you have to tell them why to use oven mitts, because if you don't, and you don't justify why they have to do something, the chances of them using them are going to go down, and then they're going to get burned. So anytime you can include why something needs to be done or how important something is, those two questions, anytime you can answer those in a paper, it makes it that much stronger. So here are some suggestions for a better step-by-step how-to process essay. This has to be left in third person because remember, all professional writing is in third person. So we don't want any you in this because that would automatically be second person. And another way that this paper would automatically fall into second person is if you start every sentence, or if you start a majority of sentences or independent clauses, if you're going to start those with verbs. As soon as you start a sentence with a verb in English, you automatically are implying the word you. So if I say, go pick up a pencil, what I'm really saying is, you go pick up a pencil. So anytime you start a sentence or an independent clause with a verb, what you want to do is put some kind of person in front of it. The person. You want to try to avoid he and she, so this way you don't exclude any gender. But if it was the paper about the hair again, you could say the hairdresser. One should, one must. One is always really popular when you first learn how to do this type of an essay. But basically, if you find yourself starting upon editing, if you're starting a sentence with a verb or an independent clause with a verb, put a human in front of it in some way, shape, or form, and that'll take you out of second person. The other thing that you want to make sure that you do is be very selective with your jargon. Do they really need to know the fancy word, or is the concept enough? So if you're trying to explain to somebody how to do yoga, and you're explaining a pose that's going to stretch their hamstring, do you need to use the word hamstring, which you're then going to have to define? Or could you just say the big muscle in the back of their thigh and leave the name of it out completely? That's a decision that as a writer you have to make. But anytime you're going to use some kind of jargon, you have to explain it the very first time, just like we talked about in the slang jargon colloquialisms recording. So another example is the toe of a hockey stick. I had a student who wrote a how-to process paper on how to suit up to play a hockey game and put on all of the equipment. And part of the paper, he talked about the toe of a hockey stick. Well, if you think of a hockey stick, you might not know what the toe is. So someone would say, well, the end. Well, there's two ends of the hockey stick. So something that you could do sometimes to explain jargon is describe it in a way comparable to something someone has seen before. So for instance, the toe of a hockey stick, you can say that a hockey stick looks very similar to a leg and a foot. The toe of the hockey stick would be where the toes of a person's foot would be, and the curve of the hockey stick would be where an ankle would be. Everyone's seen a leg, everyone's seen a foot, and everyone has seen some toes. So that would be a way to define your toe of a hockey stick jargon, is just by describing it by something else. We even do it naturally. If we think of driving, if you have your license already, where do your hands have to be on the steering wheel? They have to be at 10 and at 2. And we use 10 and 2 because those are comparisons to where the 10 and the 2 appear on a clock. So that's how we describe that. So sometimes explaining jargon is done through description. You want to keep in mind that your reader has never done this before. You're writing to a general audience, and that doesn't necessarily mean dumbing things down. Sorry, I accidentally flipped the thing there for you. And I don't like when students say I have to dumb this down, because nobody's dumb. It's just a different level of what you know and what you don't know. And your job right now is to teach somebody else how to do something. So you want to make it as followable as possible so that they don't get discouraged. If they get discouraged, they're not going to try. If they don't try, then they're not going to create whatever you're asking them to do. So if you've ever cooked or baked or something like that, and the recipe is unclear or hard to follow, or there are ingredients that you don't understand or know how to use, or kitchen equipment you don't know how to use, you either don't do the recipe at all, or when it comes out crappy, you feel really bad about yourself. So we want to avoid that stuff for your readers. So you want to make it as clear as you possibly can. One of the next things that makes an essay, a process essay, a lot stronger is something that I call reader self-check points. So a reader self-check point is it appeals to the senses. So it's kind of a way to let the reader know if they're on target or not. And it also lets them know if they're screwing up without flat out saying, hey, you're screwing up. So you want to appeal to the senses. So at this point, it should look like, it should feel like, it should smell like. The batter would be a thick consistency. someone was making a paper airplane for me in an essay. So of course I had the piece of paper and I'm trying to make the paper airplane. And in one of the first steps, the paper airplane has a square on the bottom and a triangle on the top. So the reader self-checkpoint was, at this point, your piece of paper should, well, minus the U, at this point, the piece of paper should look like a house. And I was like, yes, perfect, awesome, I have a house. And then things had to be folded and refolded and tucked, and I read this essay, and I was so confused because that was the last reader self-checkpoint I had. And by the end of the essay, I looked down, and I still had a house. And I still, to this day, cannot make a paper airplane. So the more of these that you put in a paper for a process essay, first of all, the longer the paper is. So if you have a page limit to meet, that can be really helpful. But with each step, it would be a really great goal to let the reader know whatever you're doing, that's what it should look like or feel like or smell like at that point in time. Because when someone reads that, if theirs doesn't look like what you're describing, they know they did something wrong and they can back up and try the step again, rather than waiting until the very end to realize that they have messed up. So other suggestions for this are not picking technical topics and not picking things that can't be replicated. So again, remember, the idea behind a process essay is that I can repeat the steps that you're telling me to do. So I had a student who happened to be taking one of my writing classes and was also taking anatomy and physiology at the same time. And they got the same lecture that you guys are getting, but decided to do the paper on mitosis. So mitosis is a sciencey word that means cell division. So your cells in your body split. I can't stand up and mitose. So it's not like I can read an essay on how these cells divide and I can stand up and go, I just mitosed. I can't replicate that. So that is not a topic that you want to pick for this kind of an essay. Another topic that could be really difficult, not because of the process itself, but because of all the stuff that goes with it, would be a topic like changing oil. So to actually change the oil in a car isn't actually difficult. So you really just kind of drain the oil and then put new oil in, basically. But if you've ever been, I don't know how many of you are car people, but imagine imagine sliding underneath the hood, the body of the car, the undercarriage of the car, under the hood, and describing where the drip pan is and the oil pan, and trying to describe for the reader what these things look like so that they can take the correct pieces off. So it might not be that the process itself is super difficult, but all of the jargon and all of the fancy terms surrounding changing the oil and the undercarriage of the car, all of that might be so involved and way too much to have to try and define and explain for the reader that they get lost in all of that stuff. So be careful if you are picking your own topics that you just don't pick something too technical like that, where you have so many things that you have to define. If you choose a topic that's related to technology, you want to specifically name the type of technology, either right in the title or right in the introduction, because technology is changing all the time. So right now, when I'm recording this, the iPhone 7 Plus is the newest iPhone that's out. But you might be watching this and there's already an iPhone 8, 9, 10, whatever. And if I'm trying to explain to you how to do something on this iPhone 7 Plus, but I don't tell you that it's a 7 Plus, I just say it's an iPhone, The features might be different by the time 8 and 9 come out or new updates come out. So even if you think back to an iPod, and I don't even know if you're old enough to remember back to iPods, but before there was a phone, there was an iPod that would play music. It looked similar to an iPhone, but all it did was play music, but it was this big deal, and it had a circular dial. Then they came out with the Shuffle and the Nano and the iPod Touch, which is kind of like the precursor or the thing before the iPhone. So there's a bunch of different types of those. If I wanted to tell you how to play music on an iPod, the buttons are different between a Shuffle, a Nano, a Touch, and the original. So I need to specify which kind of device I'm talking about so that the process makes sense. I had one student who, he was a freshman in college, and he was writing a process essay for me, and he decided to choose the topic of how to do laundry. And this paper was so good, I almost wrote home to his mother to congratulate her on raising this wonderful son who knew how to do laundry, because he told me how to sort them, what temperature to use for certain colored clothes. It was fantastic. I was totally with him. As a reader, I was right there until he told me to put quarters in my washing machine. And then I was stuck. And I couldn't finish the process because my washer at home does not require quarters. So I'm assuming he was trying to then tell me how to do laundry maybe in a dorm room, because he did live in one. But he didn't specify that from way in the beginning of the paper. If he had, then I would have known as a reader that that paper and those particular steps wouldn't fit me because I have a washer and dryer at home. So make sure right from the beginning you tell the reader what you're specifically doing. Usually this is done in the title. It's expanded upon in the intro or in the background paragraph so that the reader knows whether that process is going to fit them or not. The other thing you want to do is be very careful with gender-specific topics. So it's usually girls who do this, but they have a tendency to pick topics that they know a lot about. Nails, makeup, hair, things like that. So anytime, especially makeup, I always put it this way. If you're a girl and you're watching this, or a woman, I'm sorry, and you're watching this, and you had broken, God forbid, both of your arms, and they were tied behind your back, and your jaw was wired shut, but you needed a good face of makeup to go out, and you handed your makeup bag, just the bag, so you know the stuff's not in, you know you don't keep your eyeliner in the eyeliner sleeve that it came in from the store. But let's say you just take your makeup bag and you hand it to a man in your life, your dad, your brother, your boyfriend, your spouse, whomever. Pick a dude, your best friend. And all they have to go on to put your makeup on is the essay that you wrote. Is it descriptive enough? I'm laughing because I love this example. So would you have described mascara well enough so that they grabbed the mascara? Did you describe the concealer so that they don't think the concealer is the mascara? Because sometimes they're in the same thickness of a tube, so to speak. Did you explain how to put the eyeliner on the right way? How to put blush on? What the apples of the cheeks are? Like, if you start thinking of it that way, and you cannot talk, and your arms are stuck, do you think your face would come out the same way as if you could do it yourself? That's a way to think of this. So one project that I did with my students that I loved was that I actually had them bring in the supplies to do their process. And for once, I had an even split of boys and girls in the classroom. And one girl wrote her process essay on how to paint nails. So she talked about pushing back cuticles, removing the old nail polish with the nail polish remover. She talked about utilizing cuticle cream before doing the application of the bright red nail polish that she brought in. She talked about filing her nails. So what they didn't know was why they were bringing the stuff in. So what I did was, especially this girl with the nail polish, I handed all of her supplies to one of her male classmates, and I handed her essay to her male classmate. And the male classmate had to paint her nails and follow her steps based on her essay alone. Nothing else, just the essay. It was through that experience she realized what the mistakes were in her paper, because she ended up with red nail polish all the way up to her first knuckle because he didn't know what a cuticle was and she didn't describe it. So when she talked about painting the nail from the cuticle to the tip, she never said what the cuticle was. So he thought it was this. So the poor girl, because she brought in bright red nail polish, she had 10 fingers from here to here covered in red nail polish. And we all laughed, and luckily both of them were great sports about it. But sometimes it's really a great idea, if you pick something gender specific, to have the other gender try it out. And any issues they have, or any holes or that are their questions they have, mistakes they make, don't answer them. It means that it's a gap in the writing. So, your last step of the paper should not be enjoy, especially if you've picked something food related, like how to make peanut butter and jelly, or how to make meatloaf, or how to make peanut butter crackers, as I record this almost at dinner time, so I'm making myself hungry. Usually people pick enjoy as the last step because they can't think of another way to finish. You don't want to do that because you are a better writer than that. Enjoy is a little cheesy, and there are also various ways to enjoy things. You might cook something and someone enjoys it by smelling it, but that's not your intention or your definition of enjoy. So a lot of the times if you're doing something that's food related, you can make your last step either the cleanup or how to store leftovers or something of that nature before you go into the conclusion, rather than enjoy, because it's almost like a reader can see through the fact that you couldn't figure out how else to finish the paper. And that's okay when you're first learning, because remember, the idea behind this is we take your writing to the next level. We talked about having someone reading it and having them try it out. Typically for a process essay, you want each step to be its own paragraph. So a great pre-writing for this, I don't know if I have this. No, I don't. So a great pre-writing tip that I want to show you is to, I don't need to do this actually. A great pre-writing tip is to make a list first. Yeah, I decided I'm going to do this. Sorry. This is what happens when you do this on the fly and you change your mind. So when you've picked your topic, one of the first things that you want to do is just make a list. You can make this a numbered list. It doesn't really matter, but if I was going to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I need to get the bread. I need to get a knife, but I need to describe what type of knife I need. So I also need to describe what kind of bread. So usually you don't make peanut butter and jelly on raisin bread, but you could. So something like that where you have to describe the bread. You definitely don't make it on garlic bread, but you want to be careful of saying what someone prefers, because if they've never done it before, They don't know what they prefer. So for describing the type of bread, you could just say peanut butter and jelly can be made on almost any type of bread, from white to wheat to rye to raisin. But for this essay, white bread will be used. You could do something like that. So first I need to get the bread. Then the next step, I need to get the knife. I need to get the jelly. I need to get the peanut butter. And again, I'm going to need to describe these things. I need a paper towel so that I could put the bread on it. Then I untwist the tie off the bread. Take 2 pieces out. Apparently I can't type very well today. So then I put them on the paper towel. This is how I do it. I'm trying to think step by step of how I do this. So I place the 2 slices of bread on the paper towel. Then I take my butter knife in my dominant hand. But I need to explain what that is, because some people might not know what a dominant hand is. So I could say something like, a dominant hand is usually the one that you write with. Dip my butter knife in the peanut butter and scoop out. Now, usually when you have to scoop out peanut butter, someone will say, scoop out enough. I don't know how much enough is. But I can say scoop out enough to cover the... Scoop out enough to cover half the knife. Are you getting the idea here? So when I make a list of what I need to do, these are just my ideas. These are my brainstorming ideas. So before this, when I'm organizing my paper, this is going to be my, first I always do my intro first. Then I'm going to do a background paragraph. Explain what the topic is so that you can catch your reader up. So if they've never had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before, you are describing what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is. Or maybe you're explaining how popular they are or when they became popular, something like that, so that a reader understands why it's even worth reading the essay and learning how to do this. The next paragraph is going to be the supplies. Now, if you are doing something food related, you're going to want to split this into 2 paragraphs. If not, this can just be 1. So you want to tell someone how many. You want to tell them exactly what kinds they're going to need. So I need 1 butter knife. I need 3 pieces of paper towel. I need creamy peanut butter, but it could work with chunky if you want. Things like that. You also want to explain what the supplies are. So maybe this, if you're doing food, this might be kitchen supplies. And then you might do ingredients, but you're not writing it like a recipe. So you're, again, going to do the same thing like this. What ingredient specifically do I need? How many am I going to need? What kinds? And explain what the ingredient is. I had a student once who was making a Mexican dish, and she kept talking about this certain spice, and I had no idea what it was, and I also couldn't visualize what the dish was. She was making empanadas, and in my head I kept thinking of almost like a burrito, and that's totally not right. So her background paragraph actually turned into a visual depiction and description of what an empanada looked like. So this way I knew what I was trying to create and what the end product should look like. Then in her ingredients section, she did an awesome job explaining what the spice was, where I could find it in the grocery store, what color it was, and what color the packaging was. So sometimes you need to do that with food stuff. So now these things that I've already numbered, these now turn into your body paragraphs. These might go under my, these would probably go in a first paragraph of getting the supplies ready. Because remember, you didn't do that earlier. You just told me what I needed. You didn't actually tell me to get them ready. So anytime you're going to switch to a different step, you're going to want to change paragraphs. Each step, you want each step to have a description of the step itself. You also want each step to explain why it's necessary. And how it connects with the rest of the process. And then you finally want to include one of those reader self-checkpoints. So you can very easily make a three-page paper out of this. I've had students at various schools. My page limits are usually either 3 pages or 5 pages, depending on what school I'm teaching for. And I have many people make 3 pages out of peanut butter and jelly. Because when you look at how you set this paper up, you really have a lot that you have to do before you even get to those body paragraphs and shifting paragraphs. So, one of the reasons why you're doing this, again, is because it can be very helpful in real life. So if you want people, like I said, to do things a certain way, writing them step by step how they should do it, how you want it done, that's a process essay. Think about how many times you might have gone on eHow or WikiHow, or you might have been on YouTube looking for videos on how to do something. Those were just visual depictions of this exact essay. Some of you, I love those. I love the goof ups, like when the girl is straightening her hair and then all of a sudden she burns the hair off and half of it comes with her and she thought it was going to be this training video. Those always crack me up. But you're watching a process essay. It's a how-to on writing a process essay. It's a how-to on a how-to. You're watching that right now. This is, like I said, can be very helpful for once you get into the workplace, for new employees who have to be trained. So instead of you doing the same training over and over and over again, give them a list of steps. If someone keeps messing something up, give them a list of steps of how they're supposed to do it, and then they won't mess it up anymore. So that's how to handle a process essay. I hope that you are not too overwhelmed by all of this. If you ever end up working in medicine, or if you end up working in customer service, a process essay is going to be like invaluable to you for patient education, to send patients home with, to send customers home with. If you become a boss, here's the new employee handbook. Here's step-by-step how to do everything. And sometimes as you get older, these essays will turn into brochures or picture instructions, but the concept behind it doesn't change. So I hope this helps, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!